Okay, so we are now live on Facebook and we're recording and we're going to get started. Okay, well, welcome. I want to welcome our sage for today, Indranuja. And I'm going to read his little bio and then we can get started with him giving us all the details. He was born in 1953. That was a very good year. That was the same year I was born, in Hamilton, Scotland. He went to the university when he was 17, and it was there that he first met the devotees in the winter of 1972. And in 1973, he started going to the Edinburgh Temple with his brother Gordon Tai, then Gordon. So he has a brother that's an initiated devotee, and knew then that Srila Prabhupada would be his spiritual master. He remembers the first time he saw Srila Prabhupada coming out of his car and entering the manor. He still had long hair, and his entire visit in 1976 was like an awakening for him. At that time, he vowed to renounce the world and become Prabhupada's disciple. He was a brahmachari for 6 years until he met his beautiful, lovely wife, Lalita Saki, in 1982. And since then, he has had 4 children. And now he lives in a beautiful farm called Bhaktivan, which is 40 miles southwest of Kansas City. So that's in the United States, for those of you who might not know about the geography here. Up until the last year, we had regular programs with many congregational members. They had many congregational members attending. And by the grace of Manan Gopal and Garangi Priya, he was fortunate to meet Guru Maharaj in 2009 or 10 at a program in their old house in Hillsborough. And I remember that. I was there that day. So that was very nice to have met you then. And that was definitely a life-changing moment for myself and for himself and Saki. And he's going to talk about that more in his interview. So in his business life, he manages a medical clinic, and he's in the process of launching a new business, which he's the CEO of. So very important personality here we have. And he also serves on a board for a profit corporation and manages a nonprofit that feeds thousands of people in India. So he's a very well-rounded, accomplished personality, and wonderful to have you on today. So I'm going to just start asking you some questions, maybe to give us a little background when you were growing up, if there were any signs or cues or hints that you were going to take to a spiritual path in your teens. Any clues?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was little, I used to go to church with my mom. We belonged to a very small Protestant church called the Brethren. They were very right-wing, very strict. They were so strict that they didn't even have crosses. They were Christian, but they didn't believe in having any symbols whatsoever. It was just kind of really just very, very fundamental. But I remember having a kind of a vision one day. I'd kind of dozed off a little bit. I was quite young. And I had this vision of Jesus. And I thought, wow, this is amazing that I have some shelter. That was kind of what I thought. In any case, when I was 13, I was actually teaching Sunday school. And the lay preacher had been just talking, and he had been talking about eternal damnation. And, this always made me uncomfortable. But I had been reading all sorts of books at this point, especially books from the East, but also books like, the Somerset Maugham, The Razor's Edge, that kind of thing, you know. And it was all these books that I'd been reading were kind of about meditation and self-realization and that type of thing. And in any case, I really had this really very uncomfortable feeling that God wasn't who they thought he was. So I asked them straight up, I said, look, you know, do you mean to say that God would condemn someone to hell forever? And the guy said, yeah, that's his love. I said, it doesn't sound like love. It sounds like hate to me. It's the opposite of love. And he was like, so we had this kind of go at each other, you know, kind of thing, back and forth. And at that point, I just said, I'm done with this, you know. So I walked away from the church. And essentially, I became just a seeker, really. And then when I was 16, George Harrison released the Maha Mantra, the Radha Krishna Temple album. And the Maha Mantra went to, I think it was number 6 in the UK. But I remember the very first time they were on this very famous music program called Top of the Pops. And I was actually standing in the living room with my mother, and it came on the TV, and it completely blew my mind. This mantra was like absolutely sublime. I remember thinking, this is just something else, you know. And my mother was appalled. I remember she was thinking, this is crazy. What's happened to the world? And I was thinking, of course, I was 16. I was getting into all sorts of things. But anyway, so we started chanting Hare Krishna, myself and my brother. And then my brother and myself, actually in 1972, I met the devotees when I was in college. And that was an interesting thing. It was the winter of 72, February, I believe. It was a very, very cold day. And I was walking to this one place. It was called the Ceylon Tea Centre, and I'd become a vegetarian. And this was the only place in Glasgow where you could be absolutely guaranteed to get something vegetarian, you know? So they had a salad bar. So outside the Ceylon Tea Centre, there was a guy standing there with a dhoti and a T-shirt and a pair of flip-flops on. And he was blue with the cold. He was just freezing. I could see he was freezing, but he was distributing BTGs. And I went up to him and I got a BTG. Just like, so I had a kind of a brief conversation. And in any case, we went in and we had our salad. We came back out and he was gone. But it always struck me. I have this picture of him, and I even know who he was now, you know. I have this picture of this devotee. He had so much faith that he thought that he could distribute without a coat on or without shoes on in Glasgow in the winter. So anyway, so that was my first. And then shortly after that, a friend of mine gave me a Krishna book. One of the remember the big Krishna books?
Sure.
They were beautiful. Anyway, he gave me a Krishna book, and I read that book from cover to cover. And, you know, Prabhupada, in there, he says, just theoretically accept that this little blue cow-haired boy could be God. So I read it with that in mind, and it gave me faith that Krishna is God. And at that point, I realized, yeah, that's fine. I can accept I've already been chanting the holy name. Now I can accept that Krishna is God. And it all kind of tied together. But I had not met Prabhupada at this point. So I started going to the temple in Edinburgh, and myself and my brother, we would hitchhike back and forth. It was only 30 or 40 miles. And we would stay the weekend and then come back. And then I moved to England, and I was living about 60 miles from the manor. So I would regularly drive down to the manor and stay the weekend and then come back. And I was feeling very unhappy at that point. I had everything I ever wanted in my life. I was a musician. I had a decent job. I lived in the country with my best friends. We were all chanting Hare Krishna. I mean, we had an altar that we would offer our food on, but I was still taking drugs. So it was like, I knew that I'd have to give that up. I'd given everything else up. Everything. I was celibate at that time. I'd given everything else up. But that was the one thing I couldn't. So then Prabhupada came to the manor in July, And I decided, okay, I'm going to go see Prabhupada. And I had no intention at that point of surrendering. But then a few things happened. And pretty much Krishna forced me to surrender at that point. And I remember thinking, thank you, Krishna. I'm so happy to have Prabhupada as my guru. That's exactly what I wanted. And I remember seeing him coming out the car, and I was right behind him, and I was thinking, oh, Krishna, just let me take shelter. That's all I need to do now. I knew the philosophy. I'd been reading the books for years. I actually was preaching for years before I joined, So I really understood the philosophy. But then when I saw him, I said, okay, this is personification. And then we all went up to his room. Prabhupada's room in the manor's a big room. And there was about 150 devotees in there. But in the room itself, Prabhupada had a low table, and then he had 4 seats to the right of him. And there were 4 Indian men sitting on these seats. And the youngest of the 4, there was 3 were quite old, and then there was a young man, probably in his 20s or early 30s. And he was complaining to Prabhupada about Jan Masami had just happened. And the devotees had been selling the Maha to make some money. And he had been complaining that, he had to buy Maha Prasad. So Prabhupada started making jokes. Prabhupada was a very, very funny man. He could charm anybody, and just, really, he was very, very charming. And the 2 older gentlemen started laughing, and it was literally, they were almost falling off their chairs. They were laughing so hard, And the young man was getting embarrassed. And then all of a sudden he got the joke, and the whole atmosphere changed. Anyway, the whole room, we were all just laughing. And by the way, he was speaking in Hindi, so nobody understood what he was saying. Later on, somebody explained it to me, but it didn't matter. We were just chuckling along. It was very funny. So that was the first time I met Prabhupada. And then later on that week, I was fortunate to be able to go to the airport, and I literally sat at his feet in the airport lounge while he was, and I was just sitting looking at his feet, It was very sweet. It was very, very kind. So that's kind of how I joined. About maybe, I'm going to say a year and a half after I joined, Prabhupada left the planet, and it was like just the most mind-numbing, shattering experience of my life. I have to say, I was actually in Ireland at the time distributing books, and Ireland's a separate island, so to get to Britain you have to take a ferry. And of course, when we heard, we wanted to go back to the manor, but it took us a day and a half to get to the manor. And when we arrived at the manor, everybody was crying. It was like devastation, desolation. In any case, then the Mayapur festival rolled around in 78, and they appointed a guru for England, and his name was Jai Tirtha. Now, Jai Tirtha was a very sweet man. He was a very, very kind devotee, humble, just really everything that you would want a devotee, We just loved him, He was just such a sweet man. But when he became a guru, he seemed to lose his mind, It was like, for the first couple of years, everything was fine. And then he started taking drugs. And I remember we had bought a place in the center of the country because we had been making, 20 devotees a month or something like that for years and years. And the manor was just bursting at the seams. There was 400 devotees in this little building, So we bought this big place called Chaitanya College. And he, in any case, in 1981, after the Mayapur festival, he came to Chaitanya College. And he exhibited these Sahajiya kind of pastimes that were just completely bizarre, to the point where at one point he actually fell off the Vyasasan. And it turns out he was taking drugs. And, I remember looking at him thinking, he looks awfully stoned, And I was thinking, this is weird, you know. It was very, very uncomfortable time. But it split the yatra in two. And in 1982, he left just shortly after we got married. And I remember myself and the regional secretary of Victor Treviri, we were the only two kind of senior devotees there. We were trying to keep everything together, and literally 300 devotees left one afternoon, just left the service, just split.
How did that situation affect your faith at that time?
Well, it was interesting because it didn't worry me in the slightest, because I knew what was going on. I kind of knew that this was a fall down, that the process was still real, and Prabhupada was still there. You know, I still had full faith in Prabhupada and the philosophy. But, you know, I could see all these younger devotees just leaving, you know, and they get into all sorts of maya as a result of that, to the point where it was really, I mean, it was murder and mayhem. It was literally insanity. And to the point where one of his disciples ended up murdering him in a very gruesome way. And I remember thinking, you know, take shelter of Krishna, but when you leave the shelter of Krishna, then you're back to the world of Maya, the world of karma, and who knows what will happen at that point. Plus all the offenses you commit in the process. It's just not a safe place to be. There's no shelter there, you know. So anyways.
So what do you think allowed you to weather those storms? It sounds like when I asked you that question about how it affected your faith, and you said, well, not at all. So what do you think gave you the ability to kind of ride through it when there were a lot of older devotees who didn't have the same ability to get through it?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I had the association of some really far out devotees. I mean, some really nice devotees.
Sanga.
Probably 4 or 5 sannyasis, and then some of the older British devotees who we were very close to. So that was the other thing. And then the third thing was that I had a lot of very deep realization from just the practice of Krishna consciousness. I mean, it isn't like we practice and nothing happens. We practice and a lot of things happen. I mean, you know.
Any of those deep realizations, or one maybe that you could share that wouldn't be too private?
Yeah. I could tell you a couple maybe, but anyway, one of them was, I remember myself and this other devotee, we were driving back from Sankirtan, and it was a 6-hour drive. So we decided, okay, let's read Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we literally read Chaitanya Charitamrita to each other for 6 hours. And we literally were there with Lord Chaitanya. I swear, this was one of these things where I don't even know who was driving the truck. I mean, I was driving it, but I don't remember anything about the drive. I just remember pulling into Chaitanya College, and the two of us looked at each other and we said, hey, let's go do that again. I mean, literally, it was completely mind-blowing. So you talk about being in Lord Chaitanya's association. That was the most amazing thing. And then there was another experience. I mean, I had tons of experiences, but there was another experience where we had, I'd been out again, Sankirtan, and I had met this one young, he was 17 at the time. He became a devotee, still is. And, you know, we brought him with us. He was actually an American guy. His father worked for Lockheed Martin up in the north of England, and he was going to school there. So we just said, hey, you want to come to a festival? It was Gaur Purnima, I think it was 3 days from there. I said, we'll drive you down there. So we just picked him up and drove him down. And I remember I had to drive to this one city to pick up some parts for a vehicle. We had all these American vehicles. And I preached to him. And the same thing happened again. I got so into the preaching that I literally left my body. And he and I became this kind of unit, you know. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it was like when I arrived there, I literally almost fell out the truck. I was in kind of like some kind of trance or something. This sounds a little crazy, actually, I know, but he said the same thing to me. He said that was the most amazing thing that I've ever heard. It was like he had been, he was just coming along just to, he wasn't interested in spiritual life, but when I connected with him, when we both did this, it was like he just popped out of the material world and he became a devotee right there and then. There's a third thing, actually, that I should mention. And this happened to not me, or I have two brothers. My eldest brother's John. He never actually took initiation. But John met Prabhupada at the manor in 1973. And it's a very far out story. He had no idea about the devotees whatsoever. He had never chanted Hare Krishna or anything, but he had a business. And these two devotees that were trying to raise money for the Edinburgh Temple approached him and said, hey, could you help us raise money? And he said, sure, no problem. They said, well, I'll tell you what, Prabhupada is at the manor. Why don't you drive us to the manor? Now, you got to understand, that's a 6-hour drive. It's not just, drive us to the manor, meet our guru, and explain to him what you're doing, and then get his blessings, and then we'll get going on this thing. So Johnny drove them down there. Now, the manor was under construction at the time, The opening was in 2 months, and the devotees were working these, 24-hour shifts to get it done. So they just dumped him in the showroom and left him there, So he wandered around the manor for 3 days on his own. He had no clue what was going on. People would bump into him and say, how you doing? And just, yeah, fine, no problem. And then one day, this devotee came and got me and said, oh, we're going to go see Prabhupada. And he said, oh, it sounds good. And he thought it was kind of a business presentation or something, So they're walking up the stairs to Prabhupada's room. And Johnny turns to this devotee and he says, so what should I do? He says, oh, just pay your obeisances when you go in the room. He says, what are obeisances? And he says, oh, just do what I do. He says, oh, okay. So they go in Prabhupada's room and this devotee lays himself out, right? Flat, dandavats. So Johnny's like, okay. So he knew Hare Krishna. So he says, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And he lays himself out flat. And there was about 15 devotees. They all start laughing, They're just cracking up, Who is this guy? And Prabhupada looked at them and he was angry. He was just, why are you embarrassing this person? So Prabhupada just immediately pointed at Johnny and told him, come here. And Johnny went forward and he said, no, here. He kept coming forward. And then he's sitting right next to Prabhupada on the floor, right? Prabhupada has a big plate of sweets on the table. He starts feeding him gulab jamums and sandesh, and Johnny's eating it, and Prabhupada's preaching to him. 20 minutes he preached to him. He completely made him a devotee. I mean, I'm talking, stripped away all his false ego, completely stripped him down. He walked out of that room chanting 16 rounds and following the 4 regs. I mean, literally, it's unbelievable. When I met him after that, I thought, who is this guy? I mean, me and my brother had been chatting for years, but Johnny was like the real deal. Gave up his smoking, gave up booze, gave up everything, and just got into it. And he was doing his business at the same time. It was amazing. What a transformation. He became vegetarian overnight, He bought a cookbook, started cooking. And he lasted.
That's amazing story.
He lasted like that for about 6 months with no association whatsoever, because these two devotees, he never saw them again. But without any association whatsoever, he lasted 6 months just doing that. So it's pretty far out. So the power of sadhu sanga is not to be underestimated,
Absolutely. Well, and having your other brother to take initiation, I'm sure that also was a shelter for you also during that time.
He'd actually moved to Canada. His wife's Canadian, and they had moved to Canada. But even that story is an interesting story. When Gaur Nitai when Gore was, he actually went to Canada in 1974, and there he met his wife, and she took him to the temple in Winnipeg, and he stayed there, became a devotee. But he never shaved up, never shaved his beard off, never cut his hair, you know. But he said he would send me these postcards, all about the devotees and all about the holy name in this. So then he came back, and we picked him up at the airport, and he immediately started to preach to all my friends. And 16 of us became devotees because of him. 16. Can you imagine? They all, I was already vegetarian, but they all immediately became vegetarian, and we all started chanting Hare Krishna. And then these were the friends that, when I moved to England, we had this place in the country. They were all devotees, you know. So we used to have the devotees come and have these big kirtans in the house, and it was like these rocking kirtans, you know. It's amazing, you know. We were famous, and we would distribute prasadam to all the hippies in Cambridge. You know, it was like far out.
Anyway, those are some pretty amazing stories. Family. Yeah, I didn't, like, when I became a devotee, none of my group, friends, family, well, maybe my brother a little bit showed some interest, but outside of that, I was really on my own, you know, and it was hard. And I kept thinking, oh, I wish I had a friend from school because I tried to interest all my friends. And I thought, yeah, this is what we've all been looking for. And none of them seemed to, you know, be interested. So I always marvel when I hear these whole soul group, you know, you could call them soul groups or something, just all coming together and joining. And that's really.
Yeah, there was a whole, at the manor, there was a whole huge Scottish contingent joined, you know. It's just like an amazing amount of devotees joined. And, you know, a lot of them are still devotees to this day, but, you know, it was pretty far out.
Yeah.
It was very far out. In any case, after Jai Tirtha left, the new GBC and I just didn't get on, you know, so he basically kicked me out. So that's another thing that you kind of learn, that the one thing that you're given by Krishna is service. And when you lose your service, it's almost like, you know, you lose an arm or something, you know. It's very painful. It's a very painful experience. So I lost my service. And at that time I was running the BBT in Northern Europe. I ran the whole BBT, all the book production.
Wow.
And I loved that service. In fact, that's how I met Saki. We brought her over from New York to typeset, and she ended up being my right hand, and, you know, we get married. In any case, you know, I came to Detroit after that in 1982 on the urging of Rameshwar. I'd become very close to Rameshwar because of Jai Tirtha. And, you know, I really liked Rameshwar. We became quite close friends. But he was, you know, very insistent I retake because I had taken second from Jai Tirtha. So he was very insistent I take the second initiation. So I did a whole bunch of studying. And in the end, we had this big old argument at the airport, of all places, in Detroit. And he agreed that you don't have to take your initiation again. You're Prabhupada's disciple. End of the story. But then when I moved to Kansas, and we bought this place here, another sannyasi friend of mine, Ganapati Swami, would come visit, and he would visit a couple of times a year. And we started studying together. So we did a study of all of Prabhupada's books, and then we started studying other books. And I got Guru Maharaj's Bhagavad Gita, and that must have been about something like 2003 or 4, something like that. So when I read his Bhagavad Gita, it completely blew my mind. I went, wow, who is this person? You know, now I'd known Tripurari Swami as a brahmachari, as the incarnation of book distribution. We worshipped him. He was like our hero. For all the brahmacharis in England, probably worldwide, but in England especially, all the book distributors, they saw him as being the guiding light. You know, he's the one that knows how to do it. He's the best preacher in the world, next to Prabhupada, you know, but he's the best preacher in the world. And he's a sannyasi. And I served 7 different sannyasis in my 6 years as a brahmachari. So I was really attached to sannyasis. In any case, so when Rameshwar, so when Ganapati Swami started turning me on to Guru Maharaj's books, I started reading them. And then one day we were reading Shikshastakam together, and we spent, I'm going to say, 4 hours reading the first shloka. And we read that threadbare. And I remember thinking, this person completely understands the Siddhanta. He knows the Siddhanta better than anybody else on the planet. No doubt about it. So shortly after that, maybe a couple of years after that, Madan Gopal and Gaurangi Priya were having a program at their house. Now, I was an executive for a publishing company at the time, and I would travel all over. So this time I was going to Raleigh for a show in Raleigh, and I asked Saki if she wanted to come with me. So Saki would come occasionally with me. So she came with Nimai, and I knew that Madden lived close by, so I'd called him up and said, hey, can I come visit? He said, oh, yeah, I'm having Tripurari Swami at a program. I said, oh, that'll be nice. So then we went and it was you remember the little studio? Yeah, you remember that.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was a beautiful little room. So I was sitting at the back next to the window with Saki and Nimai, and he gave this amazing class. And Saki turned to me after the class and she said, that's just like Prabhupada. She didn't say that exactly, but she said something like that. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, because I'd been reading these books. So I was really impressed to start with. But she was really impressed. She was like blown away. And at that point, we decided, okay, I definitely need a Siksha Guru. And it was interesting because Ganapati Swami was really liked him also, and he would tell me things like, yeah, he really understands the Siddhanta. He's really up there, but he'd been ostracized from ISKCON. And I was like, couldn't care less about ISKCON. I was like, whatever. I'd been there, done that, left ISKCON in 87. And I had said, never again, because I was just kind of burnt out, So, when I met him, I was like, oh, this is wonderful. What a breath of fresh air. So I bought all his books and I read them all end to end. And I took his Bhagavad Gita. This is the one thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to read his Bhagavad Gita and Prabhupada's at the same time, verse by verse. So I did that. I read verses to verse. And when I was finished that process, I was like, I'm done. I'm totally convinced. He explained to me what Prabhupada was talking about. That's really how I saw it, So it was a complete revelation for me. And Guru Maharaj, obviously I've met him many, many times now. And, we listen to his classes and his Q&A on Sunday on a regular basis. And he's been here a couple of times. He came twice to the farm here, spent a few days. And, we had a kind of a festival here. And it was very, very nice. The Bhaktivan, our place is called Bhaktivan, but Bhaktivan is 40 acres. It's a beautiful place. It's a very, very beautiful place. And for years, my friend Gopi Mata had a yoga studio on the property, and she taught yoga teachers. And as a result of that, I mean, literally, we've made hundreds of devotees here, hundreds and hundreds of devotees. And, some of them have gone on to be temple presidents and stuff like that, but it's I kind of feel very blessed to be here, And in fact, there's a funny story about that. I might as well tell you this funny story. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Ashutosh Ojha. He's a very famous astrologer. His father was Prabhupada's astrologer, and he was the king of Jaipur's astrologer. So he was a famous astrology family. Anyway, so I met him in England, I don't know, in like 93 or something like that. And he told me that the way my chart was, that I would never be happy or successful until I moved to either Kansas or Iowa. And I thought, what's in Kansas? So 2 years later, I moved to Kansas just by complete accident. I never meant to. So you talk about the divine arrangement. That was pretty funny.
That is really, that's because those are two places I don't think anybody would pick, that to go to, kind of like, the Midwest, really? What's out there? Just, yeah, not much.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Yeah, you've done some real nice outreach. So I have some questions about, you got through those brahmachari years, and seems like, you had some challenges, but you kind of got through them pretty smoothly, it sounds like, because you had good association. And so then you entered Grihastha life, 1982, and you've had 4 children. And I'm just wondering if you have had some struggles in that time period that you would like to share that may have been, challenging for you.
Actually, that was probably the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge I've ever had was losing a son.
Right.
So my son was killed in an accident, and actually he was hit by a truck, and I actually crawled underneath and pulled his body out, and he survived for 2 days on life support. And these 2 days, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it probably saved my life. He saved my life. He saved my spiritual life for sure. At that time, I was a big shot. I was a sales manager for a huge international insurance company. I was making tons of money, driving fancy cars, all the rest of that. And I was losing my mind, actually. I could see materialism I was still chanting, but it was like very superficial. Anyway, that happened. And I remember it was a very far out process. So just give me a minute to kind of make this discernible.
Sure.
He was on life support, as I say, and when he actually passed away, I hadn't shaved, or I'd just been sitting by his bedside. And actually, my mother came down, and she fasted for the whole day by his bed. She was a very sweet lady, my mom, and she just sat there and prayed for a whole day just beside his bed. And that gave me strength. I thought, that's so kind of her to do that, And then when he actually passed away, we were in the ICU, and it was a dark room. I went away and took a shower and came back. And when I came back, Saki was holding him, holding his body, and she was crying, and she was talking to him. And I remember around her, there was this glow. It was like these beings were in the air. People would probably say I'm insane, but I saw them. They were like Vishnu dutas, and they were in the air. And I knew, okay, Krishna's taking care of him. I don't have to worry, nothing to worry. And then he left his body and just left, and then the room got dark again. And I remember that gave me an incredible faith, but at the same time, I realized that the road I was taking was the wrong road. I had taken the wrong road. So we struggled on for a couple of years in that place. And then we decided we can't do this anymore. So we sold our house and we moved to the south coast of England, to a house actually on the beach. And I started working for the manor, actually, funnily enough. I was doing a research project to find a new property for self-sufficiency project. And I ended up writing with another devotee, Akundadi, we ended up writing this very in-depth business plan. But my job was to find the actual land, the building, the land. So I was going around the country doing that. And, it was a very wonderful experience, because it showed me that this is feasible, that you could do self-sufficiency, that this is possible to do, but you need a lot of different things to do it. So when I ended up, when that thing finished, a devotee friend of mine had a business in Hawaii, and he said, well, why don't you come manage this business? Because he knew I'd been a manager. So I went to Hawaii and I managed this business for this German devotee. And then that devotee asked me, so we relocated to Hawaii, and that was kind of nice for Saki and the kids, So at that time, then I took that business and relocated it to Las Vegas. And when we ended up in Las Vegas, we just hated the place. It was like horrible. It was,
I can imagine after going from.
I remember hearing this joke once. If I owned hell in Vegas, I'd live in hell and rent out Vegas. So it's kind of like that, So anyway, when I was in Vegas, when that contract finished, my best friend Kota was here in Kansas, and we had been keeping in touch. And he said, well, why don't you come to Kansas? Because we were just going to go back to England. But I didn't want to go back to England. Now that we were in the States, I thought, let's just stay there. So we ended up in England. And as soon as I got to Kansas, I said to him, okay, we're going to find a place and we're going to start a project out in the country. So we immediately started looking for things. We didn't have any money, but I thought Krishna will provide. And it's amazing how Krishna provides. I mean, when I landed in Kansas, I had 1 month's rent and really nothing else. But I found work, and then I ended up being an executive for a publishing company, that was based in San Francisco, but an office in Lawrence, and they just kept promoting me, and I ended up. It was a kind of a far out job, I ended up, as an advertising director for an international publication, and I kind of traveled the world with that, and it was hard work, I have to tell you. Anyway, so I did that for many years, and that's how we afforded to buy this place, So
how is it that you were able to get involved again in a very high-powered kind of workplace and not get pulled into the materialistic aspects of it? Or maybe you did again, but
well, no, here's a funny story about that, because everybody called me Indra at that point. Like in business, everybody had always called me by my regular name, Ed. But when I interviewed for that job, there were already 2 Eds in that department. And they said, do you go by any other name? I said, well, as it happens, all my friends call me Indra. So at that point, I was Indra. And of course, that opened up a whole thing about Hare Krishna, this and that. And in fact, the first time I went to DC on a business trip, my boss was there and his wife, and we were staying at the Hyatt downtown. And I was waiting in the bar for him. We were going out to Georgetown for a meal or something. And I was chanting, I didn't have beads at that time. I had a clicker, I've renounced the clicker. But anyway, I was clicking away in the bar, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And he comes in, he says, oh, what are you doing? I says, oh, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. He says, oh, would you teach me? So my boss and his wife, I sat him down in the bar at the Hyatt Regency, and I taught him how to chant Hare Krishna. So it was far out.
So if anybody ever sees Indra in a bar, don't think that he's there breaking the principles, but he's there preaching.
So we went out to Georgetown, and we were in this restaurant, and it was, I think it was kind of like Halloween time. Anyway, so the doors were open. It was kind of one of these restaurants where they have doors that open onto a patio, and it's on the main drag there. So I hear the the Harinam party's come along the road. so my boss says, hey, there's your buddies, let's go. So we all jumps up, and we goes out and we joins the Harinam party. It was hilarious. It was just like, so for months after that, whenever my boss would come to my cube, he would say, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So it was like far out, Anyway, I think in Kansas, people are a little more open-minded, Maybe, I don't know. Although they always say it's very conservative here, but
Well, you have a very fun-loving, light nature, humorous. You like a lot of humor. You like
oh yeah.
fun, all that. But yet, there's also a very serious side to your nature, and it's just interesting how Krishna has arranged so many things in your life to kind of fulfill both the needs of the fun-loving and the serious sadhaka.
Yeah, you can't, I don't take life very seriously. I have to say, just like I manage a clinic, a medical clinic here in Lawrence right now, but the director, the person that owns the clinic, is a devotee. He's my best friend's eldest son. He's a medical doctor, but his goal when he put this together was to make it a completely alternative, integrative clinic. So the first thing that we decided was, well, what are we going to call it? So he said, well, what about Atma Clinic? I said, oh, that's a great name. So it's the Atma Clinic in Lawrence, Kansas, and it has become one of the most famous places, this whole area, for the type of work that he does. And, I have by Krishna's mercy, the great privilege of managing that. And as a result of that, I've managed a bunch of companies in the last 10 years, I've launched a lot of different businesses and that type of thing. In fact, I always thought I'd love to help devotees do this, so Neela really was the first really good one, shall we say. And we are growing this clinic very well. But an offshoot of this clinic's another business that we're just launching at the same time. And that has even more potential. So I'm kind of, that's kind of what I do. And I really wanted to help Guru Maharaj with his projects. But for whatever reason, it just never worked out. The businesses just didn't work very well. So that is my goal. That's what I pray for. I pray that one day I'll actually be able to do something, so for him.
Well, that's a beautiful prayer. And I think you are doing a lot for him. It may not be like in the direct way well, I think we all had some idea, like moving to Sagrahi and some other things. But yeah, just being who you are and sharing his, books and, having him come and speak in Kansas. I mean, all those things have been wonderful services that you've done. I just wonder if they're just looking, we still have some minutes, but just any other things. I know that it was a very challenging time for you when your son left his body. Any other major or?
Well, actually, I kind of touched on the whole yatra disintegration. That was bad. But, I don't know. I've been persona non grata in ISKCON a number of times for whatever reason, I don't know. I always wonder why that is. And that can be challenging too, because I have a lot of friends in ISKCON, and certainly they're wonderful devotees. And I've always tried to remain positive no matter how people see me, because they really see me in the light of Guru Maharaj. But I've been vindicated because now we have a whole group here in Lawrence, in this area, that we regularly read Guru Maharaj's books, and right now we're more than halfway through the Bhagavad Gita. So that to me is like my life. My life is preaching. I have no other goal in life. I mean, business for me is just something that I do in order to preach. It's not like I have any, I don't get me wrong. I love doing what I do. I really love it. I love the whole challenge and the analysis and all the work that goes into it, hiring people and training them and all that. But really and truly, when we actually boil it all down, why do we do it? Because at the end of the day, it facilitates the important stuff. Life is short. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and now I'm old.
You know, so I've got a few years. In fact, it's interesting you say that. Actually, there is something that was a huge challenge. About 5 years ago, I started experiencing really bad pains in my chest. And, you know, my doctor at that time was Neela, the guy that owns a clinic. So we had been treating it for one thing and thinking, but he was always a little skeptical. I said, well, we should check your heart out, make sure it isn't your heart. So about 4 years ago, I actually went to a cardiologist and they said that I had angina, that there was a problem with my heart. And when that happened, he said, okay, we'll do a stress test just to check it out. Now, my mother-in-law passed away on the Monday. I was getting the stress test on the Wednesday, and I was leaving for Philadelphia to go to her funeral on the Thursday, right? So I'm in the stress test, and I blacked out. I collapsed. And it was like, wow, what happened there, you know? So they did some tests and stuff, and I walked out into the parking lot, and I'm sitting in the parking lot making some phone calls, and my phone goes off, and it's the nurse, and she says, "Oh, we saw something. You need to have an angiogram." So I said, "Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I'm going to Philadelphia, so when I come back, we'll take care of it." So I thought, well, tell you what, I'll phone Neela and I'll ask him. So I called him, and he said, "You know what? Let me call the cardiologist. I'll get back to you before 6. Don't worry." Calls me back in 10 minutes and says, you're not going to Philadelphia. Sorry. You have to get this angiogram. So I had the angiogram, and I'm in the room with the cardiologist, and he's got a big monitor in front of him. He turns the monitor around and he points to an area in my heart and he says, "See that thing there? If that bursts, you'll die immediately." Now, when two different astrologers a few years ago told me that I was going to die at a certain point, that I wouldn't live long. In fact, they even told me when I was going to die. It never happened, obviously, but something in their chart said, "Okay, you've got this karma that your heart's going to kill you." And it turns out my uncle and my grandfather on my mother's side both had died of the same thing. It was congenital. So anyway, so the cardiologist is telling me that I could die right now, and I looked at him and I said, "Understand, guy, this ain't up to you. It ain't up to me either. This is in Krishna's hands, you know. If I die right now, that's perfect. And if I don't die right now, it's also perfect. But I don't feel like I'm going to die. I think I've got things to do, and, you know, Krishna's going to look after me." So I had a triple bypass, blah, blah, blah. I went through that whole thing and it was fine. And as a result of that, actually, I feel fitter today than I have for years. I feel like I get a new body, you know. Mm. So I always remember Guru Maharaj talking about that sometimes Krishna gives you karma in order that you'll carry on. Because, you know, everybody said I should have died. That's the bottom line. But you know what? I was never once had any fear whatsoever of dying. Not once. Wow. And you know, why should we fear dying? It's just like anything else. You know, you open one door and then, you know, you go through it. You know, it's not the end of the world.
Beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful. So what are some of the most, or would you say the most profound changes that you've seen in yourself through the process of practicing bhakti and becoming a hero sadhaka?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because remember, you start with the spark. So the spark for me was the holy name. So I heard the devotees on the TV, and that holy name awakened something in me. Then when I got the book, that awakened it further. Then when I saw the guru, that was like the culmination of that process. So I kind of got to the point where, okay, I have faith, you know. So my faith was firm at that point. And then after I took initiation, and then it took a bit of a dip simply because, you know, there was so much chaos in ISKCON. It was like just a world of insanity. But then meeting Guru Maharaj was like meeting Prabhupada again, you know. It truly was. I truly felt like I had two gurus at that point. That really I had full faith in Prabhupada and I had full faith in him. And that's been the case ever since. and I don't mean to in any way demean or not demean, but I mean, what's the word? There's a word I'm looking for. Underestimate, his influence. His influence is the number one influence in my life, and it always will be. Now, but I have this abiding faith in Prabhupada that it's just pure gratitude, that he got me here, but Guru Maharaj is my sustainer, he's the one that's sustaining me. And I truly feel like, we can climb mountains together. I truly feel like that, that nothing's impossible anymore. And yeah, it's a wonderful place to be. I would, but I also see how it's hard for people nowadays. For our generation, Archana-siddhi, it was a lot easier because we had ashrams,
Yeah.
and they were hard. They weren't easy, but at least we had an ashram that we could go in and stay there and get that association. And, I'd go to Mangalarti at the man. There would be 400 devotees at Mangalarti. I mean, it was incredible. It was just 4:15 in the morning, just chanting the holy name out the wads. We had kirtans that lasted 4 hours. I mean, think about that. A 4-hour kirtan where you just lose yourself in the kirtan completely. And, I mean, I try to teach this to this generation, but it's hard. It's complicated, because you need to find your way, and you need to find your way at this time. That, it isn't the same as it was, but then that's an opportunity and a challenge. So, yeah. So my challenge is to find the bridge, to try and bring people into that safe place and teach them what I know and let them grow and give them shelter when they ask for it, So.
It's beautiful. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're going to see if we have any questions from any last thing that you would want to say that I maybe didn't ask you that you think is important for everyone to know.
There's a million things.
I know there's so many things.
One little thing I'm just going to say. About 10 years ago, Guru Maharaj gave me 5 cows to look after. I don't know if anybody's ever looked after cows, but you know what? You want to increase your bhakti, take care of cows. Do the garden and take care of cows, but cows are amazing. They reciprocate in every kind of way, including bad ways. They butt you, they're mean sometimes, but you know what? When you go up and you're scratching them, you're feeding them, you're cleaning them, it's an amazing thing, and that was a real blessing. That was a real blessing from Guru Maharaj. And 2 of the cows have since passed away. They were quite old, but we looked after them right up to the minute that they did that. And my youngest son now looks after them. And I am so grateful that he's taken up that service because he loves that service. It is like, he is so, so kudos to Nimai.
Yes,
Nimai
kudos
Chandra.
to Nimai. That's, Cow Seva. I have to say that's one that I haven't really ever entered into, just my fear of the animals. They're just so big. And I've had my friends have, I've had a friend who had their foot stepped on, and I've had a friend, Sumati, who got thrown, and my dear friend Pranada's son who was thrown up in the air. So I have this very maybe cautious. I'm very cautious around the cows. So I have to do that in my mind to worship the cows.
That's all right. You don't have to even go in the pen if you don't want to. But the truth of the matter, I've been butted, I've been stood on. I mean, it's I guess it doesn't really fit. But look at Saki. Saki goes and takes care of the cows. She's a tiny wee thing.
She's tiny. Yeah.
I mean, she'll go out there and she's shoveling, in the winter, she's shoveling dung and scratching them and feeding them and,
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a service that gets Krishna's attention very quickly and a lot of mercy from it. So I encourage everybody to take that up as if you don't have, fears like I
If
do.
you can.
If you have the
Well,
facility.
the other thing that I do every year is grow a garden. So we grow a lot of vegetables and then freeze them, can them, that kind of thing. I would encourage everybody to do that also. There's nothing like having your own produce to offer to the deities. And then the third thing is we have a beautiful temple room. We have a beautiful temple room with deities, a completely separate big room, 350 square feet. That's another thing that I think, the process of deity worship is just so wonderful for keeping you focused, keeping you grounded, That's something that not just a little picture but actually, when you have your own place, get a little say Gornitai deities or something and just start the process. It doesn't have to be, we don't do complicated worship, but every day sake bathes our shalagrams and
Nice.
it's very, very beautiful process. So.
Yes, deity worship and for grihastas is so helpful if you have the time to, don't even, like you said, no, if you can keep it very simple with Gornitai worship and
Right.
So thank you so much. A lot of really, it's lovely to hear from you, even though, we've known each other for some years now since Madan's program that you came to. So it's very nice to hear some details, get the story filled in a little bit.
Thank you.
So we do have one question here in the chat from Sharda. Where in South Coast of England were you before you went to North America?
I was actually just near Camber, Rye. You know Rye? So we were actually in Camber,
Rye.
Right? Camber Sands. So we were there. We had actually, if you look up Camber Sands, there's a place called the Watch House, which is in the far east side. We had that house. It's a big house and it's got a kind of a beautiful thing on the roof. So yeah, we lived there. And then we moved a little north of there to Peasmarsh, where Paul McCartney lives.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Up there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Just curious.
No
Because I'm
problem.
in Devon right now. So it's my other home in Devon, as well as Sharanagati in British Columbia. So just wondering.
Oh, my brother
Yeah.
started Sharanagati. He was one of the first, Gornitai. He was one of the first devotees there.
Wow.
Oh, I thought that name was familiar. So thank you. Okay. I'll tell them back in Sharanagati.
Yeah. Is Balakrishna still there?
He's still there. He's a little bit weak, frail now, but he doesn't do farming anymore. He does more social media now, but building up his own website and Zoom meetings and stuff. But yeah, he's still around.
Well, say Haribo to him when you see him. Him and Gore were good friends. He was good friends with me also. He was a sweet man.
Okay, I will. Oh well. Hare Krishna, I'll let you go. That was
Nice
lovely.
to see your face this time. Nice, well done, Sharon.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Bye.
So, so we have a comment from Madan Gopal. Jai Pops, love you. And
he is my son by default. When he first got married, they came and lived with us at Bhaktivan. And I tell you, Madan Gopal and Gauranga Priya are so, so dear to us. They are just such sweet, sweet devotees. And he was such a big influence on me. Such a level-headed, honest, wonderful, so what can I say?
Nice, beautiful. And then Indra has a question for you. She said, such a pleasure listening to you.
Oh.
Maybe I missed it, but I wonder, how did you get the name Indranuja? And what does it mean? And how do you like it? Haribo.
Well, first of all, Indranuja means Indra, Anuja means you could translate it as the younger brother of Indra. So Aditi had 10 sons. The 9th was Indra, the 10th was Vamana. So it's a name for Vamanadev. And Prabhupada was translating the 8th canto of Vamanadev pastimes, I think, and that's how I got the name. So it's a very unusual name. There's only one Indranuja, that and Prabhupada disciple. There's a couple, I think, I've met a couple of others, but it is quite an unusual name. So, yeah.
And how do you like it?
Oh, I love it. Oh, Indra is such a Scottish sound to it, you know. It's got such this. I hated the name Edward. It was an accursed name, you know. it's English, you see, and the Scots don't like the English, so it's like that's a joke, by the way. But anyway, the so they had this whole thing, you know. My mother gave me this name, and I asked my mother one day. I said, "Why did you give me an English name?" She says, "Oh, I had an uncle called Edward." I said, "That's a terrible name, but it's like, you know." She says, "Oh, it's fine." So anyway, I was like, "Okay." So I was always wanting to get rid of that name. So when I got the name Indranuja, I said, "Oh, that's a brilliant name. Especially you can reduce it to Indra." And so Indra.
Controller.
There you go. Yeah, but it's from Indra Bahia.
It's from Indra, yes. Of course, and that's why she would be asking that question.
Yeah.
This is from Akura, yeah. Is your brother Gore president, temple president at Soho, London?
No. He lives in Prince Edward Island in Canada. He has a farm there. So yeah, he has been in ISKCON for a long time. That particular Gore, I don't even think is a Prabhupada disciple, as far as I know. But anyway, yeah. My brother has the distinction of being him and his wife were the very last to get second initiation from Prabhupada. They got second initiation the day before Prabhupada left.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway.
So Akura, I have a question for you. How did you do with the translating?
Yeah.
Wow, Krishna empowered you. It's because you had such a sincere desire, Akura, to do that service. I know I listened to Prabhupada for 2 months on listening to his lectures for hours every day and could not understand a word. I mean, maybe a few words, but then one day it was like, yeah, right. So thank you so much, Akura, for being able to come on and take up the challenge, and Krishna empowered you. So,
Jai.
Any other questions from anyone that you'd like to ask? Could just unmute yourself and ask if you have a question. And if you're on the Spanish side, you could ask Akura to ask for you. Okay, we do have something from Annapurna.
Well, that's a really hard question. I mean, I know lots of astrologers, but the only one that I ever found that was really good was this Ashutosh Oja, who I don't even know if he's still alive. But, you know, I mean, you have to take astrological charts with a grain of salt. I mean, honestly, you can't be too attached to what they say. They'll give you a general indication of stuff, you know, like him telling me that I should live in Kansas. I didn't take his recommendation. I just ended up here. But it's interesting. When I got here, everything just came together. It was like magic, just completely magical. The whole thing just coming together, buying the land. I mean, going from zero to, you know, getting a career from nowhere. And then, you know, improving my Krishna consciousness just immensely. So maybe there is some truth to it. So you just have to find someone who's good. And, you know, there are a few devotees that do practice it. Unfortunately, one of the ones that I really did like was Yoga Maya's husband. What's his name again, Archana? What was his name? Hamsadutta. Hamsadutta unfortunately passed away, but he was actually a very good astrologer. I really liked his methodology. You can find devotees, so just find a devotee that, you know, comes recommended. Ask around and you'll find somebody, and then be aware that you are a devotee, and that means that you're under the divine energy now. You're no longer under the modes of material nature. Astrology really is more about how the modes interact. So, you know, that's why I say you take it with a little pinch of salt, you know, just because it won't necessarily be true, you know, or very true.
So thank you for that.
Good. There you go.
Okay. Nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
There you go. Well done.
Yeah. And I think, totally what, you know, if you're looking for some help, maybe with what direction to go with career and things like that, it could be really helpful with understanding your propensities. And, but as far as predictive value, I don't know. It's unless you have somebody who like you're an astrologer, but I've heard a lot of devotees telling me that they should have died a long time ago and they're still alive, and you know, so
yeah, that I found was kind of not very nice. That to me is not a sign of not a good astrologer.
It's not really a good thing to be telling.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't be telling people.
I mean, everybody should know that death is in their chart, but as far as, and everyone should act as if today is their last day. I mean, I think that's good advice.
Right.
And live in such a way that, you know, you really make every day count. But yeah, as far as Krishna, it's up to Krishna how long a devotee stays in the world. And, you know, if we can do better in another situation, then Krishna's going to make that arrangement. So
Exactly. Well done. Thank you.
well done.
All right. Well,
so thank you so much. And let's see, next week we have Mahamantra, Devi Dasi from Raleigh. So I'm excited to have her interview.
so I like Mahamantra.
Yeah, she's a lovely devotee. And so we look forward to seeing everyone next week, and or even before. We'll see you maybe for the classes during the week or a Sunday call. And thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. Jai.
Jai Guru Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Haribo.